As an investigative journalist, I see a case built on patterns, suspicious transfers, forged signatures, life insurance changes, secret beneficiaries, and a trail of lies hidden behind wealth and charm. A pregnant wife is sent toward a paradise trip, while private messages suggest someone is waiting for her not to come back. The deeper she looks, the clearer it becomes. This is not betrayal alone. It is a carefully engineered setup.
Julian kissed me goodbye in our Chicago penthouse, rushing off to a late night meeting. As the door clicked shut, the silence felt heavy. On the couch, his laptop was still warm. It was an email from a baby boutique. The gift note read, "For our new start." The recipient wasn't me. My perfect life had just imploded. I'm so grateful you are here. Let me know where you're from. We need to discuss how trust can mask the deepest deceptions. While the story isn't true, the lesson is. Tonight, my husband left for a client meeting that was a complete lie. I'm standing in our high rise apartment, surrounded by architecturally awards that now seem like props. My wedding band feels like a shackle on my finger. I can still see Julian's face this morning. His smile strained as he reviewed blueprints at our massive dining table. "For our future," he'd said, patting my baby bump. I should have sensed the lie. I should have noticed the tightness around his eyes, the way he avoided my gaze. But at 7 months pregnant, I wanted to believe in our history, in the life we built before his firm became a giant. The blueprints were for a massive waterfront development, a project that made him a multimillionaire practically overnight and turned our world upside down. "Julian, you're working so hard," I had whispered. "It's all for you," he'd replied, but his touch was distant. "This deal will secure our family's future forever." He was right about one thing: we'd grown apart. Since the waterfront project began, he was lost in a world of investors and deadlines, while I navigated my pregnancy feeling utterly alone. "But you're out every night," I'd said, confused. A practiced smile crossed his lips. "It's the only way, Clara. We have to make these sacrifices now for later." I remembered. I recalled late night walks by Lake Michigan and his earnest proposal in the middle of Millennium Park. I remembered when his eyes held nothing but me. I just couldn't recall when that changed. "All right," I'd agreed, wanting to believe him. His smile was hollow. He became obsessed with privacy, putting new passwords on everything. "Just standard security, honey." He even questioned my spending. His phone was a constant buzz. He'd take calls on the balcony, his voice a low murmur. I caught fragments. "Yes, she's home tonight." "No, she has no idea." "I told you the transfer is confirmed." After he hung up, I faced him. "Who was that?" "Investors," he said too quickly. But I knew the investors. His firm was our life. I was a partner on paper. "Julian, what is happening?" I pleaded. His face grew cold. "For once, Clara, can't you just trust me?" The question hurt because I trusted him with my father's entire estate. Nearly $2 million to secure our future, he'd promised. He showed me complex charts, but I never demanded access. "Of course I trust you," I'd whispered. It felt false as he held me. He smelled of a different perfume. Over his shoulder, his laptop screen was visible. I saw a file name before he snapped it shut. "Lincoln Park Residence Title Transfer." "Just finalizing a deed," he muttered, his voice strained. He wouldn't let me see the screen. In the living room, he paced like a caged animal, constantly checking his watch. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Perfect," he clipped. "Just a lot on my mind." His meeting wasn't for hours. I watched the glittering Chicago lights, the familiar skyline feeling alien and cold. My sister's text from last week flashed in my memory. "Julian seems off, Clara. Is everything all right?" I defended him then. Now, watching him, a deep fear took root. "Trust me, Clara," Julian said, his voice dropping to a murmur. "This deal makes everything right." He was correct. It was meant to make everything right for his new life. Hours later, I'd find the email that would shatter mine. I watched the digital clock on the oven. He prowled the apartment, moving from room to room, unable to settle. while I tried to breathe through the growing tension. Julian, please just sit with me. Talk to me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Can't, he mumbled, checking his phone again. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. There was no crisis. I said no more. Pushing him lately was futile. He was a different man. I just watched the city lights flicker below, a knot of pure dread twisting inside me with every passing minute. His phone buzzed, the name flashing on the screen. A woman's name I didn't recognize. Is she buying it? Her text read. Completely, Julian texted back, his thumbs flying. And the funds? She wrote. Cleared this morning. Apartment is officially yours, he replied, then quickly deleted the thread and shoved the phone in his pocket, turning on the television to a sports channel. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Who are you texting? I asked over the noise. His head turned, his eyes flat and hard. For a moment he was a total stranger. He turned back to the TV. A new hire, he mumbled. She's handling a lot. For the past 6 months, since his firm got the waterfront contract, everything was complicated. The late meetings were complicated. The hushed calls were complicated. The fact he had opinions on cribs, but not on our future, was also complicated. Yet a $5,000 charge from a baby store was simple. My phone vibrated on the table. A text from Lena. Saw Julian's new architect, Simone. Red flag, call me. My sister, my anchor. She was the one who helped me when my father died. She warned me last week that Julian seemed distant, and I should review our accounts. I'd brushed it off as her being overcautious. Then this bill. I began to question him. Julian quickly snatched his laptop from the table. What are you looking at? I asked, my voice shaky. A baby gift. He put the computer on a high bookshelf, far from my reach. We are supposed to be celebrating. Let's not ruin tonight, Clara. His voice was stern. Can you, for once, just trust me? That last word felt like a threat. I studied him, the hard line of his jaw. I saw the man I married 5 years ago, the one who made me laugh uncontrollably, the one who stayed with me all night after Dad's funeral. He was once my safe harbor. Now he was a storm. I thought of my dad, of the call on October 2nd, 2023, from the hospital about the massive heart attack. I recalled the inheritance settling 3 months later, almost $2 million. My father was a meticulous planner who prepared for any event. I remembered signing the power of attorney, giving Julian control because I was drowning in grief. He promised to grow it, to secure our legacy. I never checked the statements. Julian, I said quietly, where is my father's inheritance? He just watched me, his face unreadable. It's invested, he stated. It's safe. Then why is our checking account almost gone? His jaw tightened. The market dipped. I'm managing it. How are you managing with all these new expenses? For crying out loud, Clara. He raked a hand through his hair, his voice getting louder. The baby stirred inside me. He saw my wince and took a breath. I'm sorry, you don't know the pressure I'm under. This new hotel contract will fix everything, Sophia. I swear. Just believe in me. There it was again. Believe in me. I wanted to, so badly. The other option was that Marcus, my husband, was a fraud, that my family's investment was gone, that our life was a performance. It was too much to face. I just nodded, mute. He put on his blazer by the door at 8:15 p.m. He didn't even pause, just kissed my cheek. I'll be back in the morning, he said, already turning. My stomach clenched. You're not coming home? I have to meet a client at the office. I'll be home before dawn. He offered a thin smile. Get some sleep. I stood there in the hall, my hand on my belly, and saw him walk away without a backward glance. He didn't even wave as the elevator doors closed. I returned to the silent apartment, to the laptop on the shelf, to the lingering scent of his lies. I retrieved his laptop. I knew I would be a different person by sunrise. The password was my birthday. A small part of me wished it had failed. His email opened right away. A confirmation from a store called Petite Chérie. A family with a newborn, an attorney friend reviewing contracts, a student's design submission, all normal. Everything seemed fine. until I saw the shipping address on the receipt. It wasn't ours. It was an apartment in Lincoln Park. My heart pounded in my ears. I saw the gift card message he wrote. It wasn't for me, it was for her. For our new beginning. I can't wait to meet our baby. All my love. He was creating a nursery for another family. My breath hitched. I struggled to understand. Was it for a client? A colleague? No. The message was far too personal. He wasn't working. He was building a second life. A name in the building's digital directory corresponded to the apartment number. Simone Moreau? I typed her name into his company's employee search. Her face appeared. A junior architect, young, beautiful, beaming in her staff photo. I felt the world give way beneath me. All the late meetings, the secret calls, the vanished money, it all clicked into place. It all clicked with a sickening finality. My hands trembled as I dug deeper online. Her profile was locked down, but her main photo was visible. A shot of her and Leo, his arms slung casually around her shoulders. Her hand was cupped over her own pregnant stomach. I slid to the hardwood floor. The missing funds from our accounts suddenly made sense. It was financing his secret life. Her Boston apartment, her nursery, their child. He was stealing our baby's future. The tech genius I married, the man I'd entrusted with my family's fortune, was a lie. My sister Sophie always said my father was wary of Leo. 20 years as an investment banker, 20 years reading men. He saw Leo's ambition as a dangerous, hungry thing. For 20 years he warned me. I called it paranoia, but I was just a fool, and I still didn't have the whole story. I was just watching my husband's life become a horror movie on my laptop. I scrolled through their synced text messages, counting the minutes she had written. Love you more, he'd typed back. His words, even on a screen, felt like a physical blow, so raw and familiar. The way he used to speak to me, back when our life was still full of promise. Hours later, in Sophie's apartment with a lawyer, I'd see everything. Not just texts, but bank alerts, transfers from my inheritance to her account. One was titled Nursery Done. It had photos of a room just like mine, but with the Boston skyline outside. He sent it that morning at 9:51. For our little boy, the text read. He stole it all. He was building my life with another woman. That's when I heard Sophie's key in the door, her voice calling my name. Maya, are you in here, Maya? I looked up. Her face was a storm of worry. Her briefcase dropped at her feet. You need to call a lawyer, I managed to say. My insides clenched. What did I do? Nothing, sweetie. You're fine. Her voice was calm, the voice of a crisis manager who knew how to handle the fallout. Just tell me what happened. My life, I whispered, looking past her to the empty room meant for our child. What happened to my life? She didn't speak. She just put a firm hand on my arm and led me to the sofa, away from the screen that displayed the wreckage. Is something wrong? I asked, my voice thin. A problem with their accounts? Maybe, Sophie said, glancing toward the file she'd opened on my desk. But the transfers your husband made, Maya, I just stared at her. He just authorized a life insurance policy that's setting off all my alarms. The world pitched sideways, the floor seeming to drop away. I grabbed the back of a chair. Sophie's hand steadied my arm. Maya, I need you to breathe. You're not in any danger right now, but we need to be smart. My family's lawyer joined us via video call. A man with tired eyes gave Sophie a grim nod. Mr. Harding is on his way. He's a private investigator. An investigator? My voice cracked. Why do I need a PI? Sophie's gaze was direct, full of a darkness I'd never seen. Because, she said quietly, I think Leo might be planning to hurt you. I wanted to laugh it off as a sick joke, some corporate error we'd untangle. But the words died in my throat. A deep, cold part of me knew that the perfect life is often the most fragile. I knew she was right. They sat me down in my own study, which now smelled of fear and burnt coffee. The investigator, Harding, had a face that looked weary but compassionate. That was the only thing keeping me from running out of the room. It was my home, but it felt like a cage. A clock on the mantel read 10:02 a.m. Our ultrasound appointment was supposed to be in 30 minutes. Harding was in his late 40s. with graying temples and the calm demeanor of a man who'd seen Boston's ugliest secrets. He had a retired police pin on his lapel. His eyes met mine directly. Mrs. Vance? I'm David Harding, he said. Your sister showed me the insurance documents she found. I need to ask you some things, and I need you to be completely honest. I nodded, my throat feeling like it was closing up. First, can you tell me why your husband would take out a $5 million life insurance policy on you last week? What? The words didn't compute. A life insurance policy? Harding slid a folder across the table. Your sister found the confirmation. $5 million, payable upon your death. Does that sound right to you? I shook my head, feeling numb. No, Leo. His startup handles our money, but we never discussed this. Mrs. Vance, Harding's voice was gentle. With your go ahead, I need to call the issuer and verify this policy is real. Yes, do it. My words were a desperate rush. This has to be a mistake. Leo loves me. Harding was already dialing. The call on speaker. A crisp voice answered. Commonwealth Financial Fraud Department. You're speaking with Sandra. Miss Eldridge, David Harding, Mass by license 7338. Investigating potential fraud. I need policy verification for Maya Vance. Date of birth May 10th, 1994. There was a moment of typing. Yes, I see a term life policy active under that name. Policyholder Maya Vance, $5 million. The sole beneficiary is Leo Vance. The policy went into effect 3 weeks ago. The first year's premium was paid in a single transaction. The room tilted. Can you forward the e-signature page? Harding asked. This is an urgent and active investigation. Forwarding now. Harding hung up and opened his tablet. Seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. It was the document. My name, my information, and a signature that looked like mine, but wasn't. That's not my signature, I whispered. Harding zoomed in. You're sure? Look at him in Maya. My finger trembled as it hovered over the screen. I studied calligraphy. I always loop the start of the M. That one is sharp. And the V in Vance? Mine has a curve. That one is a straight line. Harding studied the tablet, then a document Sophie handed him with my real signature. He nodded slowly. This is a forgery. I don't get it, my voice broke. Why would Leo forge my name? For what? Harding didn't answer, his fingers flying across the tablet. Mrs. Vance, I need your permission to run a full financial background check on your husband. Yes, whatever you need. Anything. More typing. Harding's face tightened. His tech company filed for Chapter 11 last month, he said softly. He's carrying over $800,000 in personal debt, and every card is maxed out. He's being sued by 3 different collection firms. I couldn't breathe. There's more, Harding said. He emptied a joint investment account over the past 6 months. The total withdrawal was over $1.5 million. That was my inheritance, I choked out. For our family. He said he was moving it somewhere safe. Mrs. Vance, I'm very sorry, Harding said, but those funds were invested in a shell corporation. The money has vanished. I held onto the table. One last thing. Your husband took a $200,000 loan from a private lender. The lender is Mickey Corrigan. We know him. He's a loan shark with ties to the Irish mob. The full amount is due in 3 days. And if Leo can't pay? Harding's expression was all the answer I needed. I looked at the clock. 10:18 a.m. My phone, lying on the table, began to buzz. Harding glanced at the screen. It's your husband, he said. This is the 32nd time he's called or texted since I arrived. 32 times. Harding tilted the phone so I could see the flood of notifications. Leo Vance. Maya, where are you? Leo Vance. Maya, call me back. Leo Vance. Why aren't you answering? Leo Vance. You're going to be late for the ultrasound. Leo Vance. Maya. Leo Vance. Please. Leo Vance. I love you. Call me so I know you're okay. The messages were a 17-minute performance of worried husband. He wants me to go to that appointment, I said, the truth a cold shard in my chest. He wants you isolated, Harding corrected softly. The intercom buzzed. It was the doorman. Mr. Vance is on his way up. 10:28 a.m. Harding placed his hand flat on the table. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice low and urgent, your husband is a desperate man who believes he is $5 million away from solving his problems. He is coming through that door in minutes. If you stay here, you are not safe. We need to leave, right now. If I cancel, he'll get suspicious, I argued. He can't touch you if we're with you, he countered. The time was 10:29. I pictured Leo's face, his joy about our son. This deal changes everything, he'd promised. I thought of my trust fund, our child's security. The line between care and control blurred. Follow your instincts, Mrs. Davenport, Harding urged. I made my decision. I didn't go. 10 minutes later, Flight 891 departed. 2 hours after, the police in Milwaukee called. I saw the truth in his expression. Harding's face went white as he stared at his phone. He was mid sentence about jurisdiction when the notification appeared. He looked up, his eyes holding a grim finality as he showed me the picture. A small advance explosive was taped under the Milwaukee rental car. My hand flew to my lips, the blood drained from my face. Jessica. I breathed into my phone, my voice empty. It's Leo. The room went silent. On my screen, the PI's email glowed. I heard my sister's panicked inhale. Sarah, what is it? Jessica's voice was tight with a new terror. Oh, Sarah, she said. Tell me. Just tell me. He's seeing someone. Jessica didn't need the proof. My shattered tone was enough. The subject line read, Our New Life. The woman was named Amelia. There were photos, messages. The words became a toxic blur I read over and over. My brain couldn't grasp the deceit, the part where our baby was a complication. The history, my voice shook. What was in his search history? Ways to induce a miscarriage, Jessica read, her voice seething, and life insurance payouts. My legs gave out. I collapsed into a chair, the phone falling. I was frozen. The car, the explosion. He did this, I gasped. No? Jessica's voice was sharp from the speaker. Sarah, listen, this isn't your fault. You couldn't have known. That device on the rental car was meant to kill you. The police would have called it a car bomb, a random act of violence. Do you see? But if that device had detonated, I'd be arranging your funeral. That's what's changed. Her voice was stone. He wanted you both gone, Sarah. We have to decide our next move. An hour later, a man was at my door. He was tall, mid-40s, in a suit that failed to hide his intensity. Jessica sent me, he said, his voice a low rumble. I'm David Harding. I'm a private investigator. She gave me the details. We should review the evidence. I showed him to the study. He shut the door and the large room felt suddenly small. Mrs. Davenport, David started, taking the seat across from me. What I'm going to suggest is extreme, and I require your absolute trust. Can you give me that? I could only nod. Your husband recently increased your life insurance policy. My stomach clenched. I know, for the baby, he said, but his family's trust is the sole beneficiary if we both die. That's wrong. We decided it would go to Jessica's children. David turned his laptop toward me. These are from his work computer. He used a VPN and private browsing. But he's not a professional. A list populated the screen. How to build a remote detonator. Undetectable poisons. The searches were all time-stamped. The final one was at 2:03 a.m. today. This is your husband, David confirmed, opening a file. He was arrogant. He saved drafts of emails to his lawyer about your prenup and the policy structure. He thought he was erasing his steps, but he left a map. Why be so sloppy, David clarified. He needed it to seem like a tragic accident. An accident negates certain prenup clauses. If you were gone, his family trust gets the entire $20 million. The insurer wouldn't contest a random act of violence. The payout depends on an accidental death ruling, not murder. Right now, the Milwaukee PD's report is leaning that way. The room spun. I gripped the desk. Sarah, David said firmly, I need you to let him think his plan nearly succeeded, that you're too distraught to be suspicious. This is now an inquiry into conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. With your cooperation, we can turn this around on him. He waited. You want me to fake it? I whispered. You want me to act like I'm unaware he tried to murder me? Precisely, David said, because your husband is the only one who knows the real story and he believes he's in the clear. He clicked on another file. It was footage from our condo's lobby. Leo, near the elevators, watching my car leave for the airport. The time was 9:51 a.m. I saw him watch my car drive away, saw his staged look of concern. Then he took out his phone, made a call, and for a brief moment he smiled. A flash of success. He thinks he won, I said, a chilling numbness creeping into my veins. My own voice sounded strange. Yes, David confirmed, and that's our opening. He leaned in. Sarah, we need Leo to think you're recovering with Jessica in Vermont. We'll secure you and monitor him. Men who think they're brilliant become reckless. He'll make a mistake. He'll see the mistress. He'll call the insurance agent. When he does, we'll have him. How much time? I asked. 3 days, probably less. I looked at the image of Leo's smile. The man I married 2 years ago. The one who swore he'd protect me. Until death do us part. He meant it literally, but not for me. David pushed a business card across the table. There's an issue, your circle will call. They'll want to see you at your sister's. You can't talk to them. We can't allow him to learn the truth. We cannot tell them what is happening, not yet. My friends, my work, they would think I was abandoning them. I understand, I replied, having no alternative. David stood and picked up a small case. It held a burner phone, a hotel key, and a thick envelope of cash. This phone only has my number, he said. The key is for a suite at the Four Seasons. The cash is for expenses. No plastic, no calls. For the next 72 hours, Sarah Davenport is resting out of state. We're about to see what your husband does when he thinks he's getting everything he's ever wanted. The hotel room overlooked the Boston Harbor. I couldn't see the beauty. I could only see Leo's smiling face. The suite was impersonal. One bedroom, a sitting room with a sofa and desk. On that desk, 3 screens showed a dozen feeds from my penthouse, the home where my husband was now acting the part of the worried spouse. David sat with me, holding a cup of tea. He'd been with me since our arrival, almost 2 hours before. The cameras are online as of 2 p.m., he said quietly. My team installed them this afternoon while Leo was at his office. The warrant was for domestic monitoring. We have eyes on the main living areas and doorways. The audio is live, so we will hear it all. At 2:34 p.m., Leo's Tesla appeared. I saw him get out, drop his keys on the hall table, and enter the living room, looking around as if it were a new place. He sat on the couch and took out his phone. For a full 5 minutes, he didn't move, just stared at the screen. Then a smile formed. It was subtle, a slight curve of his lips. Pride. It lasted only seconds, but it was there. You saw that? I breathed. David nodded, his face stern. Leo got up, walked to the wet bar, and poured the scotch. He drank it in a single motion. He stood for a moment, breathing deeply like a runner who had just finished a race and could finally relax. His sister Olivia showed up at 6:48 p.m. I saw her Range Rover pull up outside. She got out with a designer shopping bag and pressed the buzzer. Leo let her in. Olivia took one look at him and threw her arms around him. I saw her act out her concern, saw him pat her back, his face perfectly composed as he glanced over her shoulder at the street. She's involved, I said, my voice cracking. She knew. I'm sorry, Sarah, David replied. Families are messy. Olivia said something, and Leo nodded. They sat on the sofa. She unpacked expensive takeout. She brought him dinner because that's what you do when an operation is successful. Leo gave her a real smile, warm and secretive. I felt nauseous. They spoke for 2 hours. I watched Olivia gesture wildly, saw Leo nod and place a hand on her arm. At 8:52 p.m., Olivia hugged him goodbye. As soon as the door closed, Leo's facade disappeared. He went back to the sofa, pulled out his phone, and dialed, a triumphant smirk on his face. David made a quick notation. He's smart, I'll give him that. A monster? Definitely. I didn't get any sleep. I stayed in my chair watching the feeds. At 11:14 p.m., Leo lowered the lights. At 11:22, the master suite went black. I stared at the night vision feed, waiting for any sign of guilt or fear. He never stirred. He was asleep in moments, breathing deeply beside me. The rest of a man with no secrets. My sister Olivia showed up at dawn with tea. I was still sitting there. You should get some rest. I can't. She didn't press me. She simply set the mug down. At 9:15 a.m. on December 3rd, Marcus entered his study. The new smart home system he installed had a sensor on the door. He must have assumed no one was listening. I saw on the app's cloud history that a video call had been recorded. I couldn't hear the other person, just him. His voice was electric, buzzing with excitement as he gestured wildly. He paced the room, grinning, before letting out a loud, triumphant laugh. He ended the call, glanced at his phone, and pumped his fist. A clear victory. Olivia leaned closer. What on earth was that? I'm not sure, but I'm going to find out. I grabbed my phone and sent a message to our family lawyer. I need access to his call logs. We should know who he was talking to this afternoon. I watched Marcus return to the living room, still smiling. He isn't concerned. Olivia noted quietly. He's ecstatic. That evening, at 10:46 p.m., a car service dropped someone off near our gate. The street camera was grainy, the light was terrible, but I could see her silhouette, tall and slim with long hair. She walked to the side gate, used a key fob, and let herself in. Marcus met her by the pool house, pulling her into his arms. They went inside. The lights turned on. 15 minutes later, they turned off. Olivia checked the key fob's access log. Isabella Rossi, 27, with an apartment in Cambridge. Do you recognize her? She asked. I just shook my head. I had never heard that name before. The woman was gone before sunrise. The audio from the study smart hub finally went live at 4:30 p.m. on the 3rd. I wish it hadn't. Olivia was by the bay window when her laptop pinged. She glanced at the screen, then at me. Our security consultant has the live audio feed. He's routing it to my computer. A small icon flashed on the screen. The microphone is active. We can hear everything now, she whispered. Are you ready? I shook my head, but nodded anyway. Our attorney, Ben Carter, arrived at 7 a.m. on December 4th with a tablet, looking exhausted. He set a folder on the coffee table. The financials, he stated. Your husband's, we got them an hour ago. The bank sent over the full asset report. He opened the file. It was page after page of statements. I recognized Marcus's primary account, then another one receiving steady large payments. That one belongs to Isabella Rossi, Ben said. 27, an analyst at his firm, lives in Cambridge, leases a 2022 Porsche, no criminal record. For how long? My voice was a croak. 16 months. The first deposit was August 10th, 2022. Since then, over 1,400 transactions, nearly 300 major wire transfers. The figures were obscene. 16 months. I was enduring fertility treatments to start our family while he was financing his other life. We cross-referenced it with her company Travel, Ben went on. She flies for industry events. Her records show she's been in Boston 75 times in the last year, always at a hotel downtown near his office. He paused. Amelia, I'm so sorry. You have to see what this pattern represents. I stared at the page. 1,400 times, 75 trips, 16 months. Does she know? I whispered. About my pregnancy, about the trust. We don't have that information yet, Ben said, but we're working on it. That night, December 3rd, at 10:58 p.m., Isabella Rossi was in my home and I heard her speak. My God, she sounded desperate. Marcus, I saw the report, I saw the doctor's findings, I just can't believe it. Hey, shh, it's okay. His voice was soothing, the same tone he used on me when my father passed away. Come here. I heard them settle on the sofa, her crying against him. I am so sorry, she sobbed. She continued to weep. I know you two had, I mean, it was always so tense, but she is your wife. This must be. Marcus's tone was steady. Listen to me. This is almost over. The pregnancy is high risk. We won't have to hide for much longer. A short silence. Then Isabella's voice, uncertain. What does that mean? It means we can finally be together. You and me. No more hiding. No more sneaking around. We can have a real life. But the baby, her condition, bad luck, bad timing. Marcus's voice was cold and clinical, like he was solving a portfolio issue, not discussing my life and our baby. This is an opportunity for us. I felt the air vanish from the room. Olivia stared at the laptop, her hand trembling. Ben took out his phone and started recording. An opportunity? Isabella's voice was tight. Marcus, you can't say something like that. Why can't I? It's the truth. I've been looking for a way out of this marriage for a year, and now the problem might just solve itself. That is a horrible thing to say. It's a practical thing to say. A moment of silence passed. Don't act like you're not a little relieved. Another pause, this one heavier. I am, she admitted in a whisper. I'm so sorry, but I am. I'm so sick of all the secrets. I know, darling, but it's almost finished. There's one more thing, Isabella said. Her voice was quiet, nervous. Something you need to know. What? I'm pregnant. You promised we would tell her. You promised we'd sit Amelia down and explain it all. Well, now it looks like we won't have to explain anything. Marcus's voice was suddenly thrilled, overjoyed. You're 6 weeks along? We can tell everyone we got together after she was gone. They'll believe it. People connect through tragedy. No one will ever suspect a thing. 6 weeks. I pressed my hand against my mouth. Are you positive? Isabella asked. Because dates are easy to check. If the baby comes in July, July is 7 months from now. By then, we will be miles away from here. Gone? I told you, Zurich. We are not staying in Boston. Too many ghosts here. We will have a new beginning in the sun. Just the three of us. How could we possibly do that? Marcus laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh. Amelia has a significant family trust, $10 million. I become the sole beneficiary upon her death. It will take some time, but once it's released, we are set for life. 10 million. Oh, Marcus, I know. It's a total game changer. I heard him walking to the wet bar, the sound of a bottle being opened. What are you doing? Isabella asked. Making us a drink to celebrate. Marcus, I can't drink. I'm pregnant. Then I will have one for all three of us. The pop of a cork. A liquid pour. To us, Isabella. To our future. To no more secrets. To us, she repeated. Her voice was just a faint sound. Ben and Olivia were both still, looking at the laptop. By this time next year, Marcus declared, we'll be looking at apartments in Zurich. $10 million buys a whole new life. It buys a lot of discretion. I love you, Isabella whispered. I love you too, both of you. A pause, then his voice softened. Let me feel. Marcus, stop it. Not yet. A quiet giggle from Isabella. Then Marcus's voice, so filled with adoration it made me sick. Hello in there, little one. Daddy's so excited to meet you. I barely made it to the powder room before I threw up. I was kneeling on the cold marble floor, heaving into the toilet, my entire body shaking. I was aware of Olivia behind me, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't process it. All I could hear was Marcus saying, Dad is so excited to meet you, to a child that was not ours, a child conceived while he waited for my death. When I was finally done, Olivia was beside me on the floor, holding a glass of water. I'm sorry, she said. I am so unbelievably sorry you had to hear that. I took the water with trembling hands. 6 weeks, I whispered. She is 6 weeks pregnant, I know. He was planning this well before I got sick. He was already, I know. I met her gaze. How am I supposed to get through this? Olivia had no words. No one did. All that was left was to move on. And moving on meant listening to my husband arrange his next life, funded by my death. We returned to the study. Ben had rewound the audio file. He was listening to it again, taking notes. Olivia sat down, creating a new document on her laptop. He confessed to planning to get the trust fund, she said. He intends to use the $10 million to leave the country. That's a conspiracy charge right there. But we have to prove he knew about the beneficiary clause before now. Ben agreed. His defense will say he only learned about it recently, that he's just taking advantage of the situation, not planning a murder. Olivia looked at me. Amelia, do you have any proof, like emails, showing Marcus researched that trust before your last appointment? I shut my eyes, recalling Marcus on his tablet at the kitchen counter, looking at the trust documents before quickly closing the screen. Yes, I said. I knew exactly where to find it. 3 days after I disappeared, my husband Marcus initiated the $10 million insurance claim. 4 days after that, the spending started. I watched it all from a family lake house in New Hampshire, seeing him walk into the lobby of Carter and Thorne at 10:34 a.m. on October 6th, carrying a briefcase and wearing the suit I got him for his birthday. I saw him sit with a lawyer in his late 50s, a man my attorney, Ben, identified as a specialist in complex estate settlements, and signed page after page for over an hour. At 10:42 a.m., Agent Thorne's computer beeped. Fidelity Life had just received a claim against the policy of Amelia Thorne. The sole beneficiary was Marcus Thorne. The policy value, $10 million. It's typically a 2 to 3 month process, Detective Harding explained, seated with us at the safe house table. But in presumed drownings at sea, they accelerate things. When a yacht is found adrift but a body is missing, they fast track the death certificate. Liam will probably get the payout by early December. December 1st, I whispered. The anniversary of our first date. Liam shot me a look that said everything he couldn't aloud. Later, he called my sister Ava. We listened on the apartment's audio feed as he stood by the penthouse window, gazing at the city. Hey, Ava, yeah, just trying to keep it together. Listen, I wanted to ask your opinion on something. His voice was thick with practiced grief, the perfect act of a broken man. I'm thinking of a small remembrance. At the conservatory garden on Sunday the 28th. For close family and friends. I just can't. He feigned a sob. I can't do a real service without her. Ava's response was a tiny sound from his phone. Oh, Liam, absolutely. Whatever you need. Do you want help with the plans? No, no. I just need people who cared about her to be there. I'll be there. I'll bring Mark, and I'll text some of her friends from the art world. Thank you. Liam's voice wavered. I don't know how I'm supposed to live without her, Ava. I never even got to say goodbye. I watched my sister's face on the video call. Tears were pouring down her cheeks, and Liam in my home turned his head just slightly from the phone's camera as a smirk flashed across his face. Mr. Davies wrote on his notepad, Memorial Central Park, October 28th, a public performance. On October 8th, at 2:15 in the afternoon, Liam went to a Chase branch in the Hamptons and withdrew $15,000 in cash. We got the security pictures in less than an hour. The quality was poor, but it was definitely him. Liam at the teller window, signing the slip, his expression perfectly composed. Detective Harding pulled up the financials on his laptop. Joint portfolio, Goldman Sachs. Balance of about $300,000. He has every right to that, so why the cash withdrawal? Mr. Davies mused. He didn't use that account, Harding said, scrolling. This was taken from your personal Centurion card, Mrs. Ashford. Not our joint account. I stared, confused. My Centurion card is in my purse in the bedroom closet. He must have taken it, Mr. Davies concluded, probably before the sailing trip. Harding concurred. The bank security AI flagged it. The primary account holder was marked as presumed deceased in the federal database on October 5th. It sent a direct alert to us. We have him on camera using his dead wife's credit card. Mr. Davies leaned back, a look of grim triumph on his face. He's getting arrogant. He's getting desperate, Harding countered. The following day, Liam called our wealth advisor. We couldn't see him, he was in the parking garage, but the audio was clear. And we heard the frustration in his voice. I know the protocol, but I am her husband and the estate's executor. I need access to her personal equity fund. A pause. 750,000. Yes, I'm aware of the exact amount. A longer silence. What do you mean you require the official death certificate? The news reports were everywhere. The boat was found. The advisor's voice was inaudible, but Liam's angry response was not. How much time will that take? It could be weeks. I don't have weeks. My business partners are calling me about funding deadlines every day. He stopped himself, letting out a dramatic sigh. I apologize. This is all just extremely hard. Can you please explain the process again? More silence. Then Liam's voice dropped. Understood. I will acquire the certificate. Thank you. He disconnected, and after a quiet moment, we heard the sickening sound of his fist slamming against a concrete wall. Mr. Davies made another note. Needs death certificate. Her funds are frozen. That evening, Liam was in the kitchen with Sophia. I booked our flights, he said, his voice like honey. Monaco, October 29th. One way. One way? Sophia sounded hesitant. Liam, that's only in 2 weeks. I know, but we can't afford to wait. The longer we're here, the more questions will come up. I want to be gone before the insurance money is even deposited. It creates too much scrutiny. But the baby, my 20-week scan is on the 1st. We will find the absolute best doctor in Monte Carlo. An incredible one. Money is no object now, Sophia. You have to trust me. There was a bit of silence. Then Sophia, her voice softer. I trust you, Liam. It's just all so fast. I know, my love. But next month we'll be on our own private terrace overlooking the sea. No more secrets. No more hiding, just the three of us. Detective Harding pulled up a new screen. Airline records. He already had the warrant for Emirates. 2 first-class seats. New York to Nice. October 29th, an 8 p.m. flight. The return field was blank. He's preparing to flee, Mr. Davies said. He thinks he's preparing to flee, Harding corrected. Harding turned his laptop to show me. The bank photo was blown up. Liam's face? Unmistakable. The timestamp, the $15,000 withdrawal. He's using your own money to escape with her, Harding said quietly. I stared at the image of the man I loved, the man who promised to protect me, the man now cashing out our life to start a new one with his pregnant mistress. As I sat in a secure apartment, a ghost observing my own life being sold off on a screen. How much more of this? I asked, my voice thin. How much longer until I don't have to be dead anymore? Mr. Davies and Detective Harding exchanged a look before Davies opened a new file. We flagged a wire transfer from Leo's private account, a detective named Russo explained. $50,000 sent on October 3rd to an entity called Blackwood Strategies. They're a reputation management firm out of Chicago. We brought in their director this morning. The tension in the office was suffocating. A reputation firm, the kind you hire to make problems disappear. Russo's voice was grave. Mrs. Vance, Leo didn't just want you gone. He hired specialists to erase you. On the 6th day, we confirmed who my husband paid to ruin my life. On the 7th, I saw the proposal detailing exactly how they planned to do it. Detective Russo came to the house at 3 p.m. on November 10th, holding a tablet with a look that promised a grim but vital truth. He put the tablet on the table, which showed a mugshot. Viktor Petrova, 46. Former Spetsnaz, dishonorably discharged in 2008. A history of arrests in the past 10 years, from assault to racketeering. No convictions ever stuck. Witnesses always seem to forget what they saw. His reputation in Chicago is that he makes things disappear. I stared at the photo, a shaved head, eyes like ice, a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was exactly as monstrous as you'd imagine. We arrested him at a hotel in Chicago this morning, Harding continued. The $30,000 crypto transfer from your husband was funneled to a shell company registered to Petrova. We have the blockchain receipts, we have their encrypted chats. A contract? My voice was almost gone. An email chain. It was heavily coded, but our cyber division cracked it. Your husband listed his requirements. Petrova named his fee. 30,000 in advance, 200,000 after completion wired to an account in Switzerland. $230,000, the value Liam assigned to my life. Detective Harding angled the tablet at me. It showed a live video from an FBI interrogation room. Bare walls, a metal table. Petrova was on one side, cuffed. Harding's partner, a tough agent named Diaz, sat across from him. A lawyer in a cheap suit sat next to Petrova, looking utterly bored. "This is live," Detective Harding said. "You are seeing it as it happens. Are you ready?" I nodded. I was not even close to ready, but I nodded. For the first hour, Petrova gave them nothing. The 30,000 was a security consulting fee. He had never heard of Liam Ashford. He claimed the emails were fabricated. Then Agent Diaz slid a file over the table. "Your burner phone records. On September 29th at 4 p.m., you accepted a call from a number registered to Liam Ashford. The call was 3 minutes long. Tell me about that call." Petrova just glared at the file. Silence. "We can cut a deal, Victor." Agent Diaz's voice was steady. "Conspiracy to commit murder will get you 15 years. You might be out in 10. Or we try you for the attempt and you will die in prison. It's your decision." Petrova glanced at his lawyer, who offered a tiny, barely visible shrug. Petrova leaned back. "What do you need to know? I met Liam Ashford at a poker game in Vegas in August." Petrova's voice was a flat monotone, as if he were reading a grocery list. "He told me he had a wife problem that was complicating a business deal. He needed a permanent solution that would look like a horrible accident. I told him accidents are costly. He said the money didn't matter." Agent Diaz leaned closer. "So what was the plan?" "The plan was for the yacht trip on the 7th, off the coast of Montauk. It's simple to stage a man overboard incident with no witnesses for miles. The cover story, a rogue wave, a tragic slip into the cold water. She would believe it was one last romantic weekend before the baby came. He would play the devastated husband, the hero who failed to save her. The bankruptcy would look like a desperate man's last resort, not a crime. The assets liquidated. He would vanish, ruined by the market, a cautionary tale. It happens with developers. They get overextended, fortunes collapse. The investigation would find nothing. The ruling would be a business failure. The creditors would settle for scraps. He would keep his 10 million. I clutched my phone. My sister Julia, her voice tense. "This isn't just a mistake." The investigator confirmed, "No." Marcus had seemed thrilled. On April 10th, at nearly midnight, an encrypted file surfaced. It held a simple note. "Sophia, the accounts are clear, he's ruined, the company is finished. Our new beginning is here." He followed it with a rocket emoji. He actually sent a rocket. Detective Harding displayed his tablet, showing the archived message. Marcus's text. Plain as day. "He's ruined. The company is finished. Our new beginning is here." And the rocket, so flippant, so cruel. I'd seen Marcus use it 100 times. After closing a big sale, after a good quarterly report, after telling a bad joke. I'd never seen it like this, as if my life was a failed project he'd just demolished. "What was in the file?" Detective Harding asked. I told him about the offshore transfers. He said to trust him. Said it was our security, then he locked me out of the cloud. Detective Harding leaned closer. "Elena, I need you to be very clear. You are confirming that Marcus Thorne conspired to commit bankruptcy fraud, that he promised you a new life overseas, that he gave you access to hidden funds and a new passport, and that when the company went under, he messaged you to finalize things because, quote, our new beginning is here." That is precisely what I'm saying. "And you will confirm this in a deposition?" Elena faced her lawyer, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yes," Elena said. "I'll give a full statement." Detective Harding set down the tablet, his eyes on me. "Mrs. Thorne, we have conspiracy, wire fraud, and asset concealment. Your husband faces major charges, but we need your help. We need him to think you're still in the dark." Julia stood, pulling a card key from her handbag. My spare key to our penthouse was there, the one with the little silver compass charm I got in Maine 2 years back. Tomorrow, Harding said. 8:30 p.m. You go into the fundraiser alone. Detective Miller and I, 4 federal agents, and you. Marcus will be there. We have him on the event's donor list. Sophia will be with him. We are taking them both into custody. Sophia, I whispered. Co-conspirator, Harding replied. She knew he was hiding the money, knew the bankruptcy was a sham, knew about the offshore accounts. She's a key player. I stared at the card key in Julia's hand, the key to the home I had run from last month, the home I shared with a man who was going to abandon me and our unborn son. Are you sure about this? Sophie asked. I wasn't. I wasn't ready to face him in our own home, not ready to see the look on Marcus's face when he knew his perfect life was a lie. I wasn't ready, but I took the hidden phone from her. Yes, before I tell you about the moment I walked into our living room and saw my husband, the man who planned my end, smile as if he'd gotten away with it all, I need to know you're listening. Leave a comment if you're with me, but be prepared. What comes next is intense. This account is drawn from real life, and the feelings of betrayal and survival are raw. If you need to step away, please take care of yourself. You're still here? Good, let's finish this. The penthouse was exactly as I'd left it. The polished marble floors I once loved now felt cold and foreign. The scent of orchids from the centerpieces at our second anniversary party, the view of the city lights from the balcony where he'd proposed. Everything was unchanged, but the man inside was a phantom, or so his investors were led to believe. Detective Harding met me at the curb at 8:31 p.m. His presence next to me was not overbearing, just a solid, reassuring anchor. My sister Julia was on my other side. Behind us, 4 agents in formal wear separated, 2 moving toward the kitchen exit, 2 dissolving into the cocktail hour chatter. Ready? Harding asked. I was not. I would never be ready, but I gave a sharp nod. Harding approached the hostess. We're with the Thorne party. A few taps on her screen. Right this way. Our group was silent. She guided us past the string quartet. Mr. Thorne is in the founder's lounge. She pointed down a quiet corridor. Not another word was spoken. Harding nodded to me, his hand outstretched. I gave him the card key, the one with the little silver compass, the one he'd need for the search warrant. He pocketed it and we pressed on. We walked inside. The lounge smelled of old leather and Sophia's perfume. Something sweet and heavy, the opposite of the light jasmine scent I wore. The lighting was subdued. The city lights twinkled beyond the massive window, and at a corner table, Marcus and Sophia sat laughing with a man in a tailored suit, their faces illuminated by a laptop showing flight confirmations. They didn't see us, didn't even look up. Marcus was pointing, tapping his finger on the laptop screen. I could see the flight details from where I stood. Geneva International. First-class tickets, one way. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder. Her hand was on her own stomach, 5 months pregnant, the small curve of her belly visible under her designer gown. I moved into the doorway, into the soft light directly in his path. Marcus, I said, just his name, my voice calm, but it sliced through their private celebration. His head jerked up. His whiskey glass slipped, spilling amber liquid on the white tablecloth. For a count of 3, maybe 4, he just stared at me blankly. His face went pale. Not just white, but a chalky, bloodless gray. His mouth fell open. No sound came out. Sophia saw me then. Her eyes widened. She let out a small, sharp gasp, a noise of pure, primal fear, and pushed her chair back so violently it toppled over as she stumbled to her feet. Marcus stood up, unsteady, grabbing the table to stay upright. No, he breathed out. No, you're supposed to be at the Cape House. I took another step into the lounge, felt Julia's hand on my back. I know, I said. My voice was quiet even, as if correcting a child who had told a fib. That was the narrative, wasn't it? You were supposed to be heartbroken. His voice was a raw whisper. the creditors, I saw the filing notification. I was never heartbroken, Marcus. I was at the district attorney's office talking to the fraud division about the $10 million fund you laundered through shell companies, the one your partners knew nothing about. He shook his head, a frantic, repetitive gesture, as if he could will me away. You don't get it. I had to. Explain what? That you hired an accountant in Zurich to cook the books? That when the audit started, you texted her and said your new beginning was here? That you celebrated Marcus? That you raised a glass with her? I looked at Sophia, who was frozen by the window, staring at me as if I were some kind of specter. That you planned a new future on our shared savings while our friends were planning our baby shower. Marcus lunged for me. Harding was faster, blocking his path. Stop, Harding said. His voice was quiet, final. Marcus's frantic gaze flew past Harding, finding mine. You don't get it. I did this for us. The market was tanking. I couldn't fail. I stopped him. You did this for $10 million and you left good people with nothing. Every time you spoke, Marcus ran. Not at me, but for the side exit, for the hallway, for any escape route. He took 3 steps before 2 agents appeared from the corridor. Their hands were empty, but their message was clear. On the floor now. Marcus stopped cold, turned, and looked at me one final time, trapped and furious. Then Detective Harding was behind him, pulling his arms back, the cold click of handcuffs echoing in the silent room. Marcus Thorne, Harding said, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bankruptcy fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? Marcus didn't answer, his eyes fixed on me. Mr. Thorne, Harding said again. Do you understand? Yes. A strangled sound. They walked him toward the exit, passing so close I could smell his cologne, the one I had picked out for his last birthday. He stopped, twisting to look at me. Elena, please, you have to believe me. I never wanted. You wanted the money, I said. You saw a disaster and called it a new beginning. And when you got away with it, you thought you'd won. Don't tell me what you wanted, Marcus. I know exactly what you wanted. They pulled him out the door, down the corridor, and toward the service elevator. Sophia was still by the window, crying without a sound. An agent, a woman in her 40s, with a calm expression, walked to her. Ma'am, you need to come with us. We have some things to discuss. I didn't know, Sophia whispered. I swear I didn't know I thought the money was his bonus. I didn't know. We can talk about this downtown. The agent said, her voice not harsh, just resolute. They helped her gather her things, then walked her out a separate door. She never looked in my direction. Couldn't, I thought, or didn't have the courage. I stood alone in the Founders' Lounge, our Founders' Lounge, the table where we'd celebrated our first anniversary, the chair where I'd sat on my last birthday, the window where we had watched the city lights. Julia stood beside me. Are you okay? I couldn't form an answer. I didn't have the words. Through the window I could see the reflection of Marcus being escorted into a dark SUV. He was looking up at our window, just looking, as if by staring long enough he might figure out how it all unraveled, how I was still standing. I held his stare, refusing to break contact. The unmarked police car pulled away, its lights silent. He's in custody, Detective Miller said quietly. I just nodded, feeling no relief, only the bone-deep exhaustion from a week of unraveling his lies. Miller had explained that Marcus wouldn't speak a word without his lawyer present. It didn't matter. We had the messages from the burner phone, the falsified loan applications, the hidden offshore funds. The next morning, in a stark interrogation room, Marcus uttered 3 words that changed everything. I'll accept a deal. They had me watch from behind a one-way mirror. Marcus sat under a harsh spotlight, his hands flat on the steel table. He looked smaller somehow. It was November 12th. Just after 9 in the morning. I hadn't eaten. Detective Miller stood beside me, his coffee cold. Across from Marcus sat Special Agent Thorne. To his side was his attorney, a man named Peterson, in his early 50s, wearing a bespoke suit that screamed high priced defense. My client will provide a full confession, Peterson said, in exchange for a reduced charge. Aggravated assault, 7 years. Edia Ramirez, on a monitor in our room, spoke into the comms. Attempted murder 1, multiple counts of wire fraud. No deals. His cooperation is noted. We'll consider it at sentencing. Peterson leaned in, whispering urgently to Marcus. Marcus's shoulders sagged, and he gave a slight nod. He agrees to cooperate, Peterson stated. Agent Thorne opened the binder, pushing a set of architectural plans forward. Explain the project's failure, Thorne commanded. Begin with last summer. Marcus just stared at the blueprints. His voice was barely a whisper when he started. Last June, I lost everything. Be specific, nearly $1.2 million on a failed condo development. I was using Clara's inheritance as collateral. Her grandmother passed 2 years ago, left her almost 6 million. She trusted me with it. I thought I could flip it. I bet on a new tower. The foundation was faulty. Agent Thorne made a note, and I owed a significant sum to a lender, a man named Dimitri, 300 grand. He made it very clear that if I didn't pay by the end of the year, he would. Marcus trailed off, his jaw tight. He would involve my family, so you decided your wife was expendable. Marcus flinched. That's not how I saw it. I figured if she had an accident, I could settle with Dimitri and start over. I wasn't thinking straight. When did the insurance policy come into play? Mid-July. I found a broker online. I searched for things like construction site accident payouts. How quickly do they settle? I found a policy with Sterling Mutual for $7 million. I filled out the application, forged Clara's signature on the digital pad, and submitted it. It was confirmed by August 1st, and that's when you conceived the plan. Marcus nodded. I weighed a few options: a car crash too messy, a mugging gone wrong too random. A fall at the new construction site seemed plausible. We have a vacation home on Lake Michigan, but there are too many neighbors. Then it hit me: the unfinished penthouse floor. It was isolated, secure, easy to stage a tragic misstep. When did Simone Dubois become involved? Early September. I knew her from the firm. We started talking privately. She was ambitious. We imagined a life together, a fresh start. I wired her an initial payment on September 19th. What was her role? Simone was supposed to meet us at the site on November 15th. She would disable a section of the safety railing. We'd go up to see the view. I'd stage a slip and fall near the edge during a sudden downpour. It would look like a horrible accident. And you were both okay with this. Marcus's face went blank. I had no other choice. When did you propose this tour of the site? The beginning of October. I told Clara it was a surprise to see the city lights before the baby came. She was so excited. She had absolute faith in me. His voice cracked. I moved the last of her inheritance that same week, stashed it in a new account. I knew I'd need it for the aftermath. November 9th. What happened that day? Marcus squeezed his eyes shut. I was getting our coats from the closet, and I sent Simone a text to confirm. At the apartment, I watched her get ready. Part of me felt, this is the last time I'll see her smile. Then I went to my car. I got a message from Simone around 4:30 that evening. She asked if we were still on schedule. I was typing my reply when I saw my wife standing in the garage, holding the burner phone. The whole thing was blown. What was your emotional state? Marcus looked up, his gaze locking with Agent Thorne's. Fury. The word was cold and hard. Fury, Agent Thorne repeated. Yes, I called Simone immediately. I told her it was off, that my wife had somehow found out and destroyed our chance. I didn't have to do anything. She took my future away. I pressed my fingers to my lips. Miller rested a hand on my shoulder. Why fury? Thorne pressed on. Your wife and your unborn child were alive. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, because I didn't have to be the monster, because I could have pretended it was a tragedy, an act of God, not my own hand. But you had already paid your lover to help you murder her, I know. You already committed fraud, moved her inheritance, and spent months planning her death. I know. Then tell me, Mr. Vance. Agent Thorne's voice was now a chilling whisper, utterly devoid of emotion. Did you feel any remorse when you were discovered? When you knew your wife and child would survive? Marcus stared at the table, at the blueprints that represented his ruin. I felt cornered, he said. Is that the same as evil? Agent Thorne closed the binder. Yes, on November the 10th, 2023. The Cook County DA charged Marcus Vance with attempted murder, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Bail was denied. His trial was set for the following spring. I stayed in that observation room long after he was gone, my gaze fixed on the empty chair where my husband confessed. Clara, are you okay? Miller asked softly. I couldn't speak. I didn't know how. The man I loved, the father of my baby, my husband, had just calmly described his month-long plot to kill me. He had recruited his mistress to help him push me from a skyscraper. He felt fury when his plan fell apart because it meant he was caught. And somewhere beneath the nauseating shock, a new feeling took root. Gratitude. Because I was alive. Because he was a failure. Because in 4 months, I would walk into a courtroom and show the world exactly who he was. I had 4 months to become the woman who survived. 4 months after I fled our Gold Coast apartment, I walked into courtroom 7B of the Cook County Courthouse and faced my husband, who wore a cheap suit. He looked thin. I had lost my partner, my future, and all trust I ever had in myself. It was March 10th, 2024, a Monday. The room smelled of stale coffee and cleaning fluid. Judge Eleanor Ortiz, 58, with sharp eyes and 30 years on the bench, presided. 12 jurors, 8 women and 4 men, from their 20s to their 60s, sat watching. My sister Sophie was right behind me, her hand a reassuring weight on my shoulder. Marcus sat at the defense table next to his lawyer, a woman in her late 40s, with an unnerving smile and a crisp gray suit. He would not look at me. He hadn't, not since the day I confronted him in our garage. At 9:05, the judge's gavel struck. The people of the state of Illinois versus Marcus Vance. We will now hear opening statements. Adia Ramirez stood up. She was 41 with 15 years of experience in this building. She walked to the center of the floor, her expression calm, and looked at the jury. This trial is about a breathtaking level of greed that hid behind a mask of love, she began. Marcus Vance kissed his pregnant wife, told her he cherished her, and planned a surprise trip to a skyscraper, knowing his mistress was preparing to disable a safety rail. When his wife discovered the plot, saving herself and her unborn child, Marcus Vance felt no remorse. He felt fury. You will hear a recording of him admitting to that fury. She paused, allowing the weight of her statement to settle. You will hear from the woman Marcus, paid to help him stage his wife's fatal fall. You will see the fraudulent $7 million life insurance policy taken out just weeks before. You will see security footage of Marcus meeting his mistress for lunch the day before he planned to kill his wife. And you will hear his own words caught on tape saying, "It was supposed to be the perfect tragedy." Ramirez turned, fixing her gaze on Marcus for a long moment before addressing the jury again. The defense will argue that Marcus Vance is not a violent man, and they're right. He wanted someone else to do the dirty work. And when his scheme was uncovered not by police, but by the very woman he meant to kill, his first instinct was to deny everything. What you have before you, members of the jury, is a calculated plot. It involves deception, asset liquidation, and a conspiracy to financially ruin a man's expecting wife. She took her seat. Marcus Thorne's counsel, Mr. Davies, stood. His tone was measured, calm, and deliberate. This is a story of a husband's terrible mistakes, not a criminal mastermind's plot to harm his family. He argued that Marcus never endangered Isabel. The revelation of his affair was a private failure, not a scheme my client engineered. Having a desperate idea is not the same as committing a crime. The prosecution's job is to prove Marcus Thorne took concrete steps to injure Isabel Thorne. The facts will show he did no such thing. He drafted foolish plans he never acted upon. He confided in a woman he never allowed to interfere. When his wife's own bank flagged the account, my client was as surprised as anyone. She pointed at Leo. You will hear about his market pressures, his affair, his ambition. You will hear the story of a titan who felt cornered and made a series of catastrophic choices. But you will not see proof he followed through because he was stopped. Eleanor sat down. The mediation room was silent. On January 5th, the petitioner called Sofia Reyes to testify. Leo was 42, a Silicon Valley prodigy, with a charming smile and a ruthless reputation built in the world of venture capital. He straightened his tie, his voice a calm, curated tenor. I found the email thread on a backup drive, Clara said, her voice shaking just once, on September 5th, 2023. The subject line was Project Nightingale. She went on. It detailed his entire strategy. He would funnel my inheritance into untraceable crypto funds, then manufacture a public mental health crisis for me. He wanted to be declared the sole suitable parent for our son. Clara recalled an email draft from October 3rd. Leo wrote, It's time. She's a risk to the brand. The legacy is compromised with her in it. He had been pleased with his phrasing. On January 6th, Clara's sister Eleanor, a sharp prosecutor, laid out the evidence. She presented Exhibit A, a new trust for their son, naming a secondary guardian she'd never met, Sofia Reyes. Exhibit B was a set of property records, a $3 million condo in Sausalito, bought by one of Leo's anonymous LLCs. Exhibit C showed security footage from their Napa estate, dated October 17th. Leo and Sofia on the veranda, wine glasses. He was kissing her, his hand resting on her pregnant belly. Then their nurse, Eleanor, played an audio note attached to an email. Leo's voice was clear. Sofia understands the mission. She protects the future. We're finally clear. The room felt cold as ice. Eleanor asked, Clara, did the defendant ever mention your or your baby's welfare in these plans? Clara just shook her head. No. She said he called her a loose end. On January 8th, in that very office, Eleanor had called to me. Clara, it's time. I rose and walked to the table. My sister grasped my hand. I picked up the pen, ready for battle. I took my seat in the conference room. It was quiet. I stared at Leo across the polished wood. He was studying a piece of art on the wall. I had waited 7 months for this moment. But when I tried to speak, my prepared words failed me. Eleanor asked if I wanted a minute. I refused. I'd prepared for this for too long. I would not hesitate. Eleanor started, her voice steady. Mr. Vance, describe your connection to Miss Reyes. But I spoke first. I am 31, I said, my voice gaining power. I am a journalist. I have been married to Leo for 8 years. Our wedding was on November 6th, 2015, at my family's vineyard in Napa. Do you have any children? His lawyer Davies asked. No, my voice caught. We couldn't. We went through 3 failed fertility treatments in 2017, 2019, and 2021. The last one was a month before my parents died. Eleanor let the silence stretch. Davies looked uncomfortable. Tell us about your parents. They were on a humanitarian trip in Peru on April 10th, 2021. Their helicopter crashed. There were no survivors. I took a breath. I was their only child, and their estate was merged with our joint assets in May 2021. And who oversaw those funds? Leo did. He was the genius behind Vance AI. He handled all our finances. I gave him my complete trust. Eleanor paused. Clara, do you know that Leo opened three private equity funds in Singapore in September 2022 without telling you? The air became heavy. I looked at Leo. His face was a mask. No, I replied. I only found out 3 weeks ago when Eleanor's investigators discovered them. Eleanor slid a document forward. I am submitting Exhibit F, incorporation papers from a Singaporean firm, dated September 10th, 2022, for asset diversification. Objection, Davies interjected. This has no bearing on the matter. It speaks directly to his state of mind and his motives, Eleanor countered. The arbitrator agreed. The documents were entered. Eleanor gave me a copy. My hands didn't tremble. Did Leo ever mention he was restructuring your joint assets? No, he claimed he was creating a stronger portfolio for our baby. He said our child would inherit a dynasty. And was that true? No, he was diverting millions of my inheritance by June 2023. A quiet gasp went through the room. Eleanor pressed on. Clara, did his behavior change in 2022 or 23? Yes, he started taking late night calls outside. He bought a burner phone he kept locked away. He became distant. He took the guest suite in February 2023. He claimed he needed to focus. Did you ever question him about it? Yes, twice. Once in December 2022 and again in April 2023. Each time he said, I manage the company, Clara, you manage the charity balls. I wanted to trust that he was protecting our future. Eleanor's tone softened. And why did you want to trust him? I looked at his lawyers because he was all I had left. Because my parents were gone, our other babies were gone, and I couldn't imagine losing my husband too. My voice broke. Eleanor passed me some water. Clara, she asked, if Leo had asked you to help him reorganize your finances for the company, would you have done it? Yes, without question, it was all ours. I would have done anything for him if he had just been straight with me. I glanced at Leo. He was looking out at the city skyline. But he didn't want a partner, he wanted me out of the picture. Eleanor nodded. I have no more questions for now. Leo's lawyer, a shark named Davies, stood up. He was smooth, almost gentle. Mrs. Vance, thank you for your openness, he started. I wish to be delicate, but I need to ask a few things for clarity. I'm aware. You said you had faith in your husband's financial skills? I did. But you now believe he abused that faith? I know he did. I know he schemed to leave me destitute and take our child. I know he used our money to buy his mistress a condo. Objection, Davies said. That's her opinion. Sustained, the arbitrator ruled. Clara, stay with what you can prove. Davies went on. Mrs. Vance, is it not the case that you and Leo talked about separating in March 2023? My body went rigid. I suggested we see a therapist. Leo said no. And did he not say, and I quote, a divorce would destroy me? Yes, he did. And how did you understand that statement? I met his gaze. At that moment, I believed he meant emotionally that our bond was too strong. Now I see he meant his company. A divorce would force him to liquidate my shares. If I was declared unstable, he would control everything. Davies was unfazed. But you agreed the marriage was in trouble. Yes. You agree Leo was under enormous corporate strain. Yes. And you agree the end of the marriage was discussed. I suggested we fix it. He was the one planning to demolish my life. Objection, Davies said sharply. Overruled, the arbitrator replied. Mrs. Vance can share her interpretation. Davies took his seat. Eleanor rose one last time. Clara, just one more item. We found a draft of a memo on Leo's server. I want to display it. She put the document on the main screen. The text filled the room. To the Vance Foundation Board, draft, dated September 15th, 2023. Subject, legacy and succession. Sophia is pregnant. She will provide a successor to my heir. By the time my son arrives, Clara's public image will be shattered, her access to capital frozen. She will be portrayed as an unstable and unfit mother. The Vance legacy is secure, the prior lineage pruned. She will never understand the true cost. The room was deathly quiet. I heard a woman behind me gasp. I glanced back and saw Leo's mother, my own mother in law, with a hand over her mouth, her face ashen. Eleanor faced the arbitrator. This memo was recovered from a server Mr. Vance had professionally wiped. He wrote it to his own family's foundation. He never sent it, but he refined it. She looked back at me. Clara, did you have any idea your husband was creating a plan to systematically ruin you? No, I breathed. Thank you. We conclude our opening statement. The defense was scheduled to begin on January 17th. The next session was set for January 20th. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Sophia holding my baby. And then I would wake up remembering I found everything because I was trying to trace a strange donation to a political action committee. The arbitration started at 9 a.m. on January 20th. Eleanor stood, calm and collected. Leo Vance had a plan, she stated: discredit his wife, seize her assets, and take their unborn son. When he found a younger woman at his firm, he didn't mourn his vows, he built a new portfolio. He saw his wife's pregnancy not with joy, but as a ticking clock on his assets. He called her a legacy holding and a depreciating asset. Members of the jury, that's not a man in turmoil. That is a predator liquidating his life. The defense will argue Marcus never physically harmed his wife. They are correct. He intended for lawyers and accountants to do the dirty work. The defense will claim his plans were just notes in a file. They are mistaken. He acted on them, funneling millions from their joint accounts into untraceable offshore funds. That is fraud. That is a conspiracy. And that is profound emotional abuse. Having concluded her opening, the prosecutor sat. Marcus's older brother, David, took the stand, his voice a low contrast. My brother, Marcus, is a fool, he began. He broke his wedding vows. He was reckless with the wealth his wife's family helped him build. But he is no monster. He never wanted to destroy Isabel. He never filed for divorce or sought power of attorney. Intent isn't action. The prosecution showed you bitter words, not one single step taken to remove his wife from their child's life, because it did not happen. The affair was a grave mistake. The finances were unorthodox but not criminal. Julian's defense was paper thin. The wire transfers were a misguided investment, he claimed, not a payment. Was it desperate? Yes. Was it proof of intent? Also yes. You just need to plant that seed of doubt, the lawyer told me. The jury was out for 12 days. I waited in a Denver hotel room. My friend Clara brought me coffee every morning. Detective Evans sent a nightly text, just to check in. The wheels of justice turned slowly. On October 5th, at 9:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from the DA's office. Verdict is in. Be here by 10:30. I walked in at 10:15. The gallery was packed. Reporters, Julian's estranged parents, Clara and Detective Evans were there. Julian sat at the table in a county-issued jumpsuit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. At 10:47, Judge Monroe entered. We rose. He sat. We sat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a retired banker named Mr. Henderson, stood, clutching a document. We have, Your Honor. On count 1, criminal solicitation to commit murder. How do you find? Mr. Henderson stared right at Julian. We, the jury, find the defendant, Julian Croft, guilty. The room exploded into noise. The judge banged his gavel. I felt Clara's hand tighten on my arm. My lungs forgot how to work. On count 2, conspiracy. How do you find? Guilty. On count 3, wire fraud. Guilty. On count 4, attempted feticide. Guilty. Julian's whole body seemed to collapse. His attorney placed a hand on his back. He recoiled. Judge Monroe thanked the jury and set the sentencing for October 19th. I escaped the courthouse into a storm of camera flashes. Reporters shouted my name. I kept my mouth shut. Detective Evans gave me a short, affirming nod. Clara was crying. I was just numb. 2 weeks later, the courtroom was calmer. Fewer reporters. Julian wore the same orange jumpsuit. He looked hollowed out. His hands shook. The judge asked for any victim impact statements. I stood. I walked to the podium. I didn't look at Julian. I spoke to the judge. Your Honor, my name is Olivia Ashworth. I'm 32 years old. I'm an art curator. I am 7 months pregnant. I have a friend who brings me coffee each morning to make sure I'm okay. I have a detective who took me seriously when I showed him the bank statements. I took a deep breath. My voice was steady. Julian didn't just want me gone, he wanted to liquidate an asset. He wanted my inheritance, our loft, my future, all of it erased so he could build a new life with his girlfriend. And when he planned it, he wasn't just targeting a person, he was targeting a mother and her child. An older woman in the gallery held a handkerchief to her mouth. It was his mother. Her eyes met mine for a moment, filled with shame, before she looked away. Every day that I live, and every day my son grows, I am choosing to be more than his mistake. I will not let Julian write me off. I will not let him write off my son. I went back to my seat. Judge Monroe removed his glasses. He looked at Julian for a long time. Mr. Croft, he said, in my 23 years of service, I have seen crimes of passion and crimes of greed, but I have never seen a man plot the murder of his pregnant wife with the cold calculation of a hostile takeover. You will have a lifetime to contemplate that. He put his glasses back on. On count 1, solicitation of murder, I sentence you to 20 years. On count 2, conspiracy, 15 years to be served consecutively. On counts 3 and 4, 10 years to be served concurrently. Your total sentence is 45 years with the Colorado Department of Corrections. Julian wouldn't be eligible for release until he turned 81. As the court officer approached, he was escorted out without a single glance back. A week after his conviction, his assistant, Chloe Vance, entered a plea agreement. She admitted to hindering the investigation, receiving an 18-month term in a low-security facility and 3 years of supervision. The court also mandated a $50,000 restitution payment from her. Her infant son, arriving in November of 2023, was placed with her own mother for the duration of her sentence. From my downtown loft, I watched the live feed of her hearing. Chloe wept, swearing she thought Julian's plans were just angry talk and that she never guessed his true intentions. The judge didn't believe her, neither did I. I left the Denver County Courthouse on October 5th, 2024, at 11:32 in the morning. The light was harsh. Reporters yelled questions I didn't answer. Detective Evans nodded to me from the steps. Clara held my hand, but there was no sense of victory. I just felt like I had survived a crash. For the first month, I couldn't leave my new apartment. I had abandoned the loft Julian and I bought together. I could not sleep in the bed where he lay beside me, planning my end. I found a 2-bedroom rental in Cherry Creek with a mountain view and no ghosts. Clara dropped off groceries. Detective Evans sent a text each morning. Are you okay? I was not. I always typed yes. On November 3rd, Clara drove me to my first therapy appointment. Dr. Anya Sharma's office was on a quiet street above a cafe. She had threads of silver in her hair and kind, steady eyes. She did not ask for the whole story. She asked what I needed. I need to stop having nightmares about the unlocked door, I said. She nodded. We will start there. The dream was always the same. I am in our loft. A man's shadow is moving past the unlocked patio door. I cannot move. I cannot make a sound. The air smells like asphalt after rain. Julian is standing across the room, just watching me with a blank look on his face. I always wake up with a racing heart. Dr. Sharma called it PTSD. She said it was a typical response to extreme trauma. She said we had to address the fear for the dreams to stop. She showed me how to breathe again. She taught me grounding methods. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel. It was a small help, but the fear of being alone was immense. In December, I tried to go to my gallery's holiday party. I got dressed, called a car, but halfway there, my throat closed up. My hands began to tremble. I asked the driver to take me back. I returned to the empty apartment and double checked the locks. Dr. Sharma said that was fine. You were not ready, and that is okay. Healing is not a straight path. On December 12th, there was a shift. I had been seeing her twice a week for 6 weeks. We had talked about Julian, the trial, Sophie, the incriminating bank records, but I had not spoken about my own sense of guilt. I can't stop thinking, I said, that if I were not so naive, so trusting, I might have seen it sooner. Dr. Sharma tilted her head. Why? Because the evidence was there. The financial secrecy, the late nights at the office. Maybe if I had confronted him, he would not have gone this far. I started crying, a quiet, heavy grief. Dr. Sharma handed me a tissue. Olivia, she said gently, you are not to blame for his decisions. You are responsible for your own well being, and you protected yourself and your son. That is not naivete. That is strength. I cried harder, but it felt like something breaking free. In January, I found a support group. Survivors of domestic abuse met on Tuesdays at a community center. The group was intimate, maybe 10 people. The facilitator, a psychologist named David, began each meeting the same way. This is a safe place to share your truth. I just listened for the first 3 sessions. I heard from Maria, 42, whose ex put a tracker on her car. I heard from Ben, 39, whose former partner drained their savings and vanished. He was in his own home when a man he had paid came in through the open back door. The payment was to stage a robbery gone wrong. On the fourth week, David asked if any newcomers wanted to speak. I drew a breath. My name is Olivia, I said. My husband tried to hire someone to murder me. And when the person he hired got scared, he decided to do it himself. The room was perfectly still. Then Maria reached over and took my hand. You are safe here, she said. That is what counts. I started writing that January. At first it was just notes, fragments. The way Julian's smile was always empty. The precise words of Detective Evans' first call, Ma'am, are you in a place where you can speak freely? By February I had 50 pages. By March, 200. I called it Calculated Loss, a memoir. Dr. Sharma told me the writing was how I could reclaim my own story. He does not get to write your final chapter. On April 1st, I emailed the manuscript to a literary agent in New York named Elena Vance. She responded in 2 days. Olivia, I read this in a single night. It's one of the most powerful things I have ever encountered. Let me see what's possible. 3 weeks later, a major publisher made an offer. A 2-book contract. My memoir and a guide for women on spotting financial abuse. The advance was $150,000. I texted Clara. I texted Dr. Evans. I texted my sister, Kate. Kate was incandescent with rage. Kate and I had a standing lunch date each month. She had resigned from her corporate law practice in September after 19 years. She said she could no longer walk past that office tower without thinking of him. I almost trusted him, she said, stirring her tea. We were in a small cafe in downtown Denver, near her apartment. If Julian had been smarter, if you had not decided to set up the nursery, you would still be in the dark. But I'm not, I said. She nodded, because I had finally seen the reality she had suspected for months. We clinked our cups together. Clara was my constant. She called me every single morning. Marco brought me pasta when I couldn't eat. He'd sit on my couch while I stared at design shows, unable to speak. He never told me to move on. He just let me grieve. On our anniversary, he showed up with cannolis and a bottle of sparkling juice. You can't have sugar, I mumbled. A little won't kill you, he said, and we have things to celebrate. We celebrated my new apartment, we celebrated family, we celebrated freedom. Then I opened the email from Liam's lawyer. Subject, asset settlement. October 3rd, 2025. Date, October 2nd, 2024. Dear Mrs. Sterling, We're drafting a proposal that honors your prenup regarding the $2.3 million Lincoln Park penthouse. We trust you will find this acceptable. Your signature is the only thing needed. Regards, David Chen. The words blurred. Marco leaned over my shoulder. What now, Soph? He wants me to sign it away, I whispered. The penthouse on the day we met. I hadn't seen that building since I left him. I couldn't even look at the blueprints. We'd spent weekends sketching the nursery. Marco was driving, my best friend Hannah in the passenger seat, me in the back. The sleek glass tower looked the same as it had a year ago. Floor 52, the whole floor, the same cold lobby, the same imposing art. I sat in the car watching the revolving door, and my stomach twisted into knots. I can't go in there, I whispered. Hannah turned around. She was in a blazer now, professional, sharp, no longer just a freelance writer. She'd taken a staff job 2 weeks ago, but her eyes were the same. Protective. Yes, you can, she said. That man needs to see you. He needs to know his money can't just delete what he did. You're the one thing he can't buy his way out of. Marco reached back, his hand covering mine. We're right here with you, kid. I breathed in deep. I opened the door. I walked to the elevators. The mediation was in a conference room on the top floor. Liam's legal team had booked the entire wing. They set up the table so I wouldn't have to look at his lawyers. I walked down the sterile hall, past the minimalist art, past his framed tech magazine cover, past the spot where I had first seen the photos on his synced tablet. The room was cold. A long glass table sat in the middle, overlooking the Chicago skyline. Each side was set for a team. I saw Liam Sterling, 32% of company equity on their documents. I saw Isabelle Monet, 10% consulting bonus, European expansion, on their ledger. White calla lilies were everywhere, cold and waxy. A large monitor on the wall was off, but I could see her face on it in my mind. One quick scroll through a hidden album, 8 minutes that torched my entire life. 4 people occupied the space: his lawyers, their paralegals, his new executive assistant in a gray suit, and me with my team. David Chen, his lead attorney, stood up. He was the man I'd seen in photos with Liam at tech conferences. He wore a custom suit and a watch that cost more than my degree. Thank you for being here, he said. His voice was placid, but his gaze was restless. 1 year ago, at 9:17 p.m., my client made a severe personal miscalculation. Over $200,000 in unapproved marital assets were diverted. We are here to finalize the separation, not to litigate the cause. He paused, looking toward Liam's empty chair. His mentee, Liam's new star programmer, was just 23. He was being relocated to London to lead the new team. He loved soccer, vintage cars, and his rescue dog. He called Liam his hero. Liam will never have that kind of devotion from me again. His voice cracked. He sat down. The room was filled with the soft clicking of keyboards. At 10:30, a forensic accountant took the floor. A woman in her 60s, all business. She cleared her throat. On behalf of the mediating party, I want to state what should have been said a year ago without legal jargon. We are sorry. Our review of the financial records confirmed a significant diversion of marital assets beginning on March 15th, 2023. This was a personal deception compounded by a breach of trust. The numbers confirm this. We have new account structures, but no structure can undo the personal harm. I'm sorry, she said. Some of the lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Others just stared at their screens. Another expert spoke next. She broke down the numbers plainly, a pattern of extravagant spending, hidden credit accounts, no shared benefit, no mitigating circumstances. It was a complete betrayal. It was intentional. At 9:17 a.m., 1 year to the minute I found out, my lawyer called my name. We have a counteroffer to discuss, he said. Sophia Rossi was meant to be a founding partner in this life. Because of her husband's actions and her discovery of them, she is here. Her future was compromised. Her husband tried to defraud her and intended to use this settlement to ensure her silence. Sophia, do you have anything you'd like to say? I walked to the table, my knees shook. I looked at the faces opposite me, impassive lawyers, a tense paralegal. I looked at the empty chair where my husband should have been. I began. My name is Sofia Rossi. A year ago, I was supposed to be building a future. I had a plan. I had a nursery designed. I was creating a home. But a woman named Isabelle Monet had a different plan with my husband, and the synced cloud account told me everything. In an instant, my marriage was gone. I paused and looked at Marco. His jaw was tight. I survived because the truth came out. $200,000 of our money did not. And when my husband found out I knew, he didn't apologize. He made a business decision. He saw that money as the cost of making me disappear. He tried to buy my silence. And he tried to use our baby as a bargaining chip. My voice broke. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm not a fool. I'm sorry my name is on the deed. I'm sorry my husband used your faith as his personal line of credit, but I swear this, I will build a life that honors my own name. The world will know who I am, not just who he was. I sat down. The room was still. Then my sister began to clap. Then my cousin. Then my entire side of the table rose. My tears wouldn't stop. After the arbitration, lawyers approached. A man shook my hand. My client was a partner at his firm. Thank you for your courage. An older woman touched my arm. My nephew was a junior architect there. Thank you. Then Isabel's replacement came over. She was stylish, in her 30s, with worried eyes. She held up a phone with a picture of a bright eyed young woman. My friend Chloe was his last protege, she said. She was a single mother, just 26. He had her relocated to Dubai after she complained. I'm so sorry, I breathed. The new architect stared at me. When I heard he paid for her silence with your money, I wanted him ruined. I wanted to yell at you. I wanted to demand why you got a settlement while Chloe got nothing. I didn't know how to respond. But I saw your evidence, she said, and I realized you didn't just take her place. He tried to do the same to you. You're not the enemy, he is. She hugged me, I clung to her and wept. That evening, I went home. For the first time since August 5th, 2023, I felt a sense of peace. My cousin sat with me. The drive was 20 minutes, a quick trip from downtown Boston to my new condo. Then she'd leave the next day. My hands shook as the car started. She held one. My sister texted, "You are free." The car began to move. I shut my eyes. I didn't see his betrayal. I saw a small nursery bathed in sunlight. When I opened my eyes, the world was still moving forward. 3 months later, an email arrived that changed everything. Again. 3 months post settlement, my food blog became a business. The First Bites collection, Meals for New Mothers, launched online on October 2nd, 2024. By October 12th, it was the #2 new food startup on the East Coast. I'd sold over $52,000 in orders in the first week. My partner, David, called me at dawn when the analytics came in. "Sophia, you did it. You told your story with food and people are listening." I sobbed, not for the profit, but because for once I was in control of the story, not Marcus, not the attorneys, not the gossip blogs, me. On October 22nd, I flew to Chicago for a feature on a food industry podcast. The host asked the question I'd heard 100 times. How did you survive a partner who tried to financially erase you? I leaned into the microphone. I survived because an architect named Chloe trusted her instincts. I survived because I finally started trusting my own. And I survived because I refused to let him be the author of my life. The podcast went viral. The next day, we hit #1. On October the 28th, I executed a plan I'd made the day the settlement was signed. I established the Nest Fund, a nonprofit to help women find financial footing after betrayal. The fund offered two things: pro bono financial planning and emergency grants, from $700 to $6,000 for women locked out of their accounts who needed to leave. I seeded it with half my settlement, $400,000. My sister became the CFO. Dr. Anya Sharma joined our board. We hired Maria Flores, an advocate who had been helping women in Boston for 20 years. Model. I was finally creating something that would have been unthinkable when I was with Ethan. During our last session, my therapist, Dr. Lena Petrova, remarked, "You're giving women a roadmap to identify the danger signs. The value of that is immense." I launched the initiative across my social media. By December, we'd raised over $200,000 in donations. Corporations started matching the funds. More survivors came forward with their own accounts. One woman sent me a note saying, "Your story gave me back my own life. My husband managed all of our money. I was completely stuck. Now I have a path forward." I read her message several times and just sobbed. On November 21st, I held a fundraising gala at a waterfront venue in Seattle. We auctioned off 214 items that night. Supporters gave me hugs. So many of them were crying. A woman approached with a picture of her sister, whose life was taken by domestic abuse. "Thank you for speaking out," she said softly. As the evening concluded, a man came over to me. He was tall, maybe in his late 30s, with kind eyes and a well used auction booklet. "Hello," he started. "My name is Liam Carter. I don't usually approach people like this, but your speech resonated with something I've been struggling with." "What might that be?" I asked. "My wife passed on 3 years ago. There was a pile-up on the I-90 bridge. I felt utterly adrift, but hearing your story about how you survived and chose to create something new helped me see that moving forward isn't a betrayal of our past. It's a way of honoring it." I was speechless for a moment and could only manage, "Thank you." He offered a small smile. "Would you consider grabbing a coffee sometime?" I thought about it for a second, then replied, "Yes." We had our first date on December 15th at a cozy cafe near Gasworks Park. We talked nonstop for 3 hours. Liam was an architect. He had a daughter, Sophie, who was 7, loved to draw, and was full of endless questions. His wife, Olivia, had passed away in March of 2021, the same month I lost my own parents. "I'm awful at this," I confessed. "This whole dating scene, I don't think I can do it." "Me neither," Liam admitted with a laugh. "But maybe we're just two people who understand loss and are willing to give it a shot." Our second date was a week after. We went to see the holiday lights at the Seattle Center. Sophie came with us. She held my hand tightly and asked, "Are you that lady from the news?" I told her, "Yes, that's me." "Were you scared?" she wondered. "Very, but we're safe now." I looked over at Liam and then back to Sophie. "I'm getting there." On December 30th, I checked the initiative's dashboard. Our public donations had hit $487,000. Adding my own $300,000, we had a total of $787,000. We had already funded 62 emergency moves and held 4 seminars on financial independence. More than 300 women had signed up for the upcoming workshop. I sat on the couch in my apartment and cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. Jessica texted me, "You made this happen. You survived a horror story and turned it into an escape hatch for others." I saved that text. On January 8th, 2025, an email with a subject line that stole my breath popped up. "Regarding Ethan Hayes, Cold Case Review." The message came from Detective Miller with the Seattle Police Department's Unsolved Crimes Unit. The first line read, "Mrs. Hayes, I have reason to suspect your ex-husband is connected to the death of his first wife." I looked at the text, my hands starting to shake. I was aware Ethan had a previous marriage. He spoke of an ex-wife, Caroline, only one time. They divorced in 2011. He called it an amicable separation. He told me she moved to Europe. The email continued. "Caroline Vance Hayes died on February the 14th, 2011. The cause was listed as an accidental slip in the shower. Her life insurance policy was for $1.2 million. I reopened her case file following your ex-husband's recent conviction. The patterns are strikingly similar. I need your cooperation. I closed my laptop and dialed Jessica immediately. She answered on the first ring. He's done this before, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It wasn't the first time. I called Detective Miller back on January 9th. I will help, I said, anything you need. Over the next 4 months, I learned everything about Caroline Vance. She married Ethan in 2009. She was 27, a brilliant and successful interior designer. Her cousin Megan told me that Caroline changed completely after she got married. She grew withdrawn and stopped returning her family's calls. Ethan said she was just focused on her new business. Megan was never convinced. In January of 2011, Caroline had a miscarriage. Megan tried to visit her. Ethan said Caroline needed her space to recover. On February 14th, 2011, their anniversary, Caroline was found dead in their Lake Union condo. The official report mentioned a slip and fall. The coroner deemed it accidental. A grieving wife, a wet bathroom floor, a horrible mishap. Ethan collected $1.2 million from the insurance payout. Megan always believed something was wrong, but she was only 25 and lost in grief, and nobody listened to her until she saw my story on the news. In November of 2024, Megan saw a report on the Phoenix Initiative. She saw the parallels in my story: a domineering husband, opaque finances, a questionable insurance policy. She reached out to Detective Miller that December. Miller pulled the old case file. He got a warrant for records tied to a cloud storage account belonging to Ethan. The forensics team found a hidden folder with files from 2009 to 2010. An unsent email draft from February 10th, 2010 read, "Once C is out of the picture, the insurance money will fix this cash flow problem. I'll be out of this debt. No more pretending." The policy was finalized on March 15th, 2010, nearly a year before Caroline's death. Her signature on the document was a clever digital fake. It was the same technique he had used on my own paperwork 13 years later. Miller also reanalyzed cell tower data from February 14th, 2011. Ethan's phone pinged at the condo between 9:47 and 11:32 p.m., which was the window of Caroline's death. His alibi, a developer in Bellevue, crumbled. In 2025, the developer admitted Ethan had pressured him. Ethan made me lie for him. I was afraid of him. A new forensic pathologist examined the original 2011 autopsy photos. She saw what the first examiner had missed: faint contusions on Caroline's upper arms and shoulders, which were signs she had been forcefully shoved. The trial began on June 2nd, 2025, at the King County Superior Court. The district attorney, Evelyn Reed, was the lead prosecutor. Ethan's expensive corporate legal team dropped him. A public defender was appointed to his case. He didn't have a prayer. Megan was the first witness called. She cried through her testimony. She explained how Ethan isolated Caroline from her family, took over her design firm's accounts, and how she tried to get her cousin to leave, but Caroline was too scared. "I lost her twice," Megan said on the stand. "First to him, and then for good." A digital forensics expert walked the jury through the recovered files and forged documents. The courtroom was dead silent. A juror actually gasped. On July 18th, it was my turn to testify. The prosecutor had me outline the repeated patterns, the faked signatures, the suspicious insurance policies issued on March 15th, 2010 for Caroline, and again in 2023 for me. The isolation, the financial control, the manipulation, I testified. This was never a single event. This is who he is. The defense argued it was all just a terrible coincidence. The jury didn't buy it. On August 12th, 2025, the jury came back with a guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder and insurance fraud. On August 20th, Judge Wallace sentenced him to life in prison without any possibility of parole. Combined with his earlier 45-year term, Ethan Hayes, age 37, would die in prison. He never made eye contact with me. He never looked at Megan. He just kept his eyes on the floor. I felt hollow. Not triumphant, not furious, just done. On September 11th, 2025, I went to visit Caroline's grave. She was buried at Lakeview Cemetery. Megan was already there waiting for me. We stood in front of a simple, elegant headstone. Caroline Marie Vance, 1982 to 2011. Beloved sister, daughter, and friend. Thank you, Megan said quietly, for speaking your truth, for getting her justice. I simply shook my head. Her death wasn't in vain. In the end, she's the one who saved me. I just wish I could have done that for her. Megan took my hand. You did. You made sure the world knows exactly what he is. That's how we save others, by refusing to let their stories be erased. We lingered there for a long time. We laid down some white gardenias and then we left, walking together. In December of 2025, I went to Japan with Liam and Sophie. I did not have a single panic attack during the entire flight. I slept without nightmares. I looked through the airplane window at the sky and thought about voids, about Caroline, about the 156, about Detective Miller and Dr. Petrova and Jessica and Megan and all the people who trusted their instincts when I couldn't trust my own. After we got through customs, Sophie took my hand. Miss Ava, are you happy? I looked down at her and smiled. Yes, I am quite certain of it now. The Beacon Foundation helped over 900 women in its inaugural year. We raised nearly $3.2 million in private grants. By June of 2025, I was back to architectural consulting and had started a graduate program in historic preservation at Boston University. Daniel asked me to move in with him. I agreed. That hollowed out marriage and the man who wrecked my life taught me three vital truths. Trust your intuition. It's your first defense. Tell your story, it will liberate another. And understand that leaving is not an end, but a new foundation. For anyone hearing this, these are the lessons from my broken home. First, you must honor that inner alarm. It is a divine warning system. I dismissed the warning signs, clinging to the illusion of our perfect Beacon Hill life. Please don't make my mistake. When he creates shell corporations or cuts you off from your support system, you must leave. That feeling exists to save you. Second, you must speak out. I was spared for something bigger than myself. I was spared to be a cautionary tale for others. Betrayal from a spouse cuts the deepest because we give them our absolute faith. Revenge is a hollow pursuit. True peace is found through justice. When the person you love becomes your greatest liability, speaking up is not a weakness. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. Do not stay silent as I did for 5 long years. Your story can be someone else's survival guide. Third, escaping is a beginning, not a conclusion. Pain is not a dead end. It is fuel for transformation. Leaving Marcus felt like my world was ending. But it led me to my calling, a foundation that has now helped over 300 women fight financial abuse. I found a true partnership and I rediscovered myself. Please let my story guide you. Do not wait until a bank's fraud alert reveals a condo in the seaport to trust that gut feeling. Do not wait for an auditor to uncover a ledger of hidden crypto accounts. Act now, leave now, seek support now. If my story helps you, please share it. Let me know if you have ever ignored that inner voice. Subscribe for more accounts like this one, sometimes altered to protect and to teach. Thank you for listening to my entire story. Be aware that our future segments might use dramatizations for clarity and impact. If that is not for you, we understand. Be well, keep hope, and trust your gut.